And the next question comes from Mr. Matthew Murr. And Matthew, friend of the channel, by the way. Matthew comments on like all the videos. He's given us a ton of support. Really do appreciate you, Matthew. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So Matthew's asking 3 questions, actually. Number 1, do you think the vote against Chapek, even if successful, might have had any real effect in removing him from his position as CEO? Now, I do want to clarify what this question means. I did reach out to Matthew and he kind of clarified it because initially I wasn't really sure. What Matthew is referring to is the shareholder vote a few weeks ago to keep or not keep Bob Chapek on the board. Now, they did vote to keep him on by quite a large margin. I think it was like 90-something% voted to keep him on the Disney board. What Matthew's asking is, what if that vote didn't go that way and it was, more of a vote of no confidence and he didn't get the 90% yes vote and it was something in the opposite direction? Would it have any effect, in removing him from his position as CEO? George, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that if the vote would have went the other way and it would have been bad for Chapek, would that have hurt his chances of keeping his position as the CEO as well, you think?
In my personal opinion, I don't think so. And the reason why is if there was something else tied to it, and that thing would be the quarterly earnings, then I would have suggested that there could have been a possibility that Chapek might have been up. But when those quarterly earnings came in, I think everyone kind of knew no matter what his position would be on the board or not as CEO, he wasn't going to get touched, because at the end of the day, the Walt Disney Company is a business. They want to see those margins being filled. They want to see the dough rolling in. And right now, Chapek is doing that. Yeah. He's keeping it, as much as everyone has very strong feelings about him right now on a personal level, as a sort of a Disney commander-in-chief sort of thing. They all have their strong feelings about him. But when it comes to what he's doing and bringing in for the company as of right now, I don't really think that would have had a major impact if they voted him off the board as far as his position as CEO. But as I said, if those quarterly earnings would have been anything different than what they were, anything below that margin, then I think they might have possibly considered somebody else for the job at that time.
Yeah, I would agree with you, George. I think that I don't think it would have immediately affected his standing as CEO. I do think it would have been one more crack in the armor, though, that would have worked against him later on. I think that, and I've mentioned this before in other videos, but like it's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. Like the ScarJo thing didn't get him removed as CEO, but it was a big blemish, right, for Chapek. This whole thing with the Florida bill didn't remove him from his position, but again, another black eye, another blemish for Chapek. This shareholder vote, if they voted him off the board, would have been yet another black eye. It just doesn't help. The guy's had a lot of losses, a lot of he's been knocked down a lot. And anytime you have these kind of things, they add up after a while. So I think it would have affected him long term. Maybe the board would have reconsidered renewing his contract in February. Maybe they're still not sure if they're going to renew him. I don't know. But all that would have come into play for sure. So short term, no, he would have been fine, Matthew. But long term, it would have come into play, I think, eventually. Eventually, this stuff is going to factor into whether the board wants to renew him as CEO in February 2023. This stuff adds up. Chapek needs, right now, I'm telling you, if Chapek wants to keep his job in February, he's got to bring in some wins. He's got to do some stuff that's perceived as a big win for him. Because right now it's been loss after loss for him. The quarterly earning was a great thing for him. That was fantastic, but he needs more of that. He needs more stuff, more good, more positive headlines. Otherwise, I don't know. We'll see what happens in February, but it's going to be.
And it makes me wonder too if Disney is waiting it out to see if he really doesn't want the position by that time. He may want to bow out himself. And for me, as you had mentioned right now, the quarterly earnings is good on the, you know, the corporate side, but then you also have to have the guests and the fans on your side as well, because this is what Disney is doing it for. They're doing it for the fans. They're doing it for their guests. And if you have that sort of way about you, that it, you know, it's going to be very interesting, I'll say to the least, now at the D23 Expo, if he's even going to show.
Yeah. And it would be a big mistake if he didn't. And we've talked about that a lot, George. Like, he needs to show up at D23, and what he needs to do is he needs to win people over. Look, Chapek is never going to win everyone over. There are some people that just will never get on board. And that's fine. That they have every right to not like the guy or not support him, and that's totally fine. I understand that. But Chapek needs to try to win people over that are kind of on the fence, that are willing to, you know, that have an open mind and willing to give the guy a shot. He needs to go to D23. I've said it before. I'll say it again. He needs to make fun of himself a little bit, maybe joke around about what a terrible year he's had. Or, you know, if you think your year was bad, look at the year I've had, or just some kind of self-deprecating humor. It humanizes him, and it makes him, you know, more likable, right? Not so stiff and rigid and corporate and polished. Like, you know, get in there, kind of make fun of yourself a little bit. I think that would go a long way with fans. He needs to do some big things, like at D23, make some big announcements, maybe for Disneyland Resort or Florida, whatever it is. Make those big announcements, get fans excited, do stuff like that. Because right now he's got a lot of bad press. And look, the quarterly earnings and the money is very important. But also, the thing too is, like, the board might get tired, and maybe they're already at that point, but the board might get tired of constantly having this guy in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, for all the, you know, for all the bad news. They don't want to have that constantly every week. They might say, hey, look, even if he's bringing money in, do we want to constantly be in the headlines all the time in this way? Maybe not. So he needs some wins. He needs to win over some fans. He needs to steer this public relations boat in a bad way. He also needs to fire whoever his current public relation person is, or people are. He might want to consider firing them and putting someone else in there.
Disney PR right now needs a complete flush out, and they need to bring some more people in, because whoever is running the PR system, and it's atrocious.
Absolutely atrocious. Now, number two, Matthew is asking, what do you think of that anti-Chapek video of Walt's head being unfrozen? I got to be honest with you, Matthew. I didn't see that video. And honestly, the way that you're describing it, I have no desire to. Look, I care deeply for the Walt Disney Company. And if Chapek succeeds, the company succeeds. I have no desire of watching videos mocking him, or like, I don't care about that. I just want to see what we can do to fix the problems that we currently have right now, and to get on the right track. And to watch some video about making fun of him, or just, I don't care. For me, there's no value in that. And I really am just more focused on, like, what can Chapek do to get this train back on track? What can we do to help the Walt Disney Company? That's really all I care about. I don't care about the attacks, the personal attacks on Chapek. I think it's childish. But what do you think, George? Have you seen this video, or do you care at all?
Believe it or not, I echo exactly what you say. I have not seen the video. I have no desire to see the video. It's, for me, for how much of energy it took the person to make that video, that you could put so much of your talents into something else than to, you know, run down a person, and then also bringing Walt into it, which I think is honestly a bigger slap in the face, because we all say the term, you know, oh, Walt would be rolling in his grave right now and everything, but it's like, when, you know, Walt's head being unfrozen when he wasn't even frozen, it's right. Like it's and I get it was like more of a pun type thing, but yeah, my main concern is I want to see the company get back up on its feet, get out of this turmoil, get back to where it needs to be. That's my main goal. And when we report all this stuff, a lot of times it may come across as being negative or what have you. And it's like, oh, well, you know, where's the positivity in that? Well, what we're doing is we're just telling the facts.
Right.
You know, we're reporting what's going on, but that doesn't change the fact that we, as part of this Disney community, does not want to see the Walt Disney Company not succeed. We want them to succeed. You know,
Right.
we want to see them strive in, you know, in all the obstacles that Walt even had to go through to get his company up to where it is today. And I'm for sure, you know, they've been through a lot, and, you know, they just have to keep moving forward.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, when we have negative things to say, whether that be about the company, whether that be about Bob Chapek or whatever, it's always done in that sphere of like concern, and it's constructive. Like that's the one thing here that we do on OG55 is we're not just going to sit here and just willy-nilly just bash Chapek for the sake of bashing Chapek. You know, I don't want to do that. Like, and neither do you, and neither does Vash. None of the people on this channel want to do that. We want to be constructive. If we have a problem with something that the company is doing, we want to address that concern, but also be constructive. What can they do? Like just now, we just talked about it. What can Chapek do at D23? Well, he can try to be more human, humanize himself, announce some big things like that. We're trying to help. You know, we're criticizing, but we're also being constructive and offering solutions. So this kind of video right here with Walt's head being unfrozen and being some kind of attack on Chapek, I have no desire to watch that. I'm not going to waste my time. And hey, if it's great for some people and they enjoy it, that's on them. That's great. You know, I just have no desire. It doesn't really do anything for me personally.
Yeah,
You know?
Me neither. It's not my Mad Hatter's cup of tea.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Number 3 from Matthew. Do you think Peter Rice would be better as CEO or chairman of the board, or both? Well, first of all, Matthew, no, I don't think he should be both. I think that Bob Iger, that was a mistake that Disney made by giving Bob Iger all that power. Look, I really liked Bob Iger. I really respect Bob Iger. He wasn't perfect, but he was a brilliant businessman, and he knew how to run Disney very, very well. Flaws and all, right? But one of the big mistakes that Disney made, I think it was in 2012, was giving Bob Iger the power of both CEO and chairman of the board. It's too much on one person, you know? And I think that Disney should have better corporate governance going forward. I'm really glad that the chairman of the board right now is Susan Arnold. That kind of puts a little check on Chapek's power, right? And I think that's good. That's healthy for Disney. So Peter Rice, yes, I think he would be a fantastic CEO. I do think Disney should get back into getting bringing studio people in for the CEO position. I think that was one big mistake they made with Chapek. I think Peter Rice would be great as CEO, but he should not hold both titles. He should not. That's too much power for one person. And the Disney board made a big mistake by allowing Iger to have both of those. And even Iger himself kind of even says that when he said that one of the reasons why he retired was because he noticed that he was sort of becoming intolerant towards different viewpoints. And that's kind of connected to just having too much power and having this thing where like, hey, my word is the final word. A big part of that comes from the fact that he was CEO and chairman of the board. If he had more of a check on his power, I think that would have been a little different. What do you think, George?
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think no matter who you are or what type of position you are of running any kind of company, you should always have someone to keep you in check, to keep you balanced out, you know, because as you had mentioned, it's a lot, you know, it on one person, it's a lot of responsibility. So when you have both titles as CEO and chairman of the board, that's quite a lot. And a lot of times both positions can kind of bash on one another. So, you know, your CEO vibe can be, you know, trumping the chairman part of you. So it's like, that's where it can kind of conflict with that notion. So yeah, as that part, I don't believe that anybody, whether it's Peter Rice, Kevin Feige, Bob Chapek, Bob Iger at the time, even though he was, that no one should have both positions. I think that they should make that as a kind of a requirement that if you are CEO, you cannot be chairman or vice versa. As far as just CEO goes, I think Peter Rice would be phenomenal as a CEO under Susan Arnold as chairman of the board. Because as you had mentioned before, and I am a big believer of it, when you bring someone in that was part of Paramount and Warner Brothers, and they literally shake the company up in a positive way and bringing them out of that funk into the Renaissance era, especially with Disney animation, it's like, as a company, don't you see that was successful?
And for those of you at home that are maybe not familiar with what he's talking about, that he's referring to Michael Eisner and Frank Wells. Michael Eisner came from Paramount. He was an outsider, and he came in and did the first 10 years at least did an amazing job with Frank Wells and running that company. And it kind of showed that, like, just because you're an outsider doesn't mean that you don't understand Disney. Sometimes the insiders are more tone deaf about that than the outsiders. It just depends on the person, really.
Because I think with an outsider, they want to put into the company of what they would like to see as a fan. And that's what Michael Eisner did a lot of. He was heavily involved in the parks, where he would go out, put on his baseball cap or his Mickey ears, and he'd walk with the crowds. That was just him. And for me, I think it's not as if you know Disney, it's if you know the business.
Right.
And once you get to know how to run that business, that's where the company as Disney will succeed.
Yeah, and you never know. Look, Tom Staggs, who everyone thought did a great job running the parks, myself included, he was the CFO of the company. He was the chief financial officer of the Walt Disney Company for years. And then he got promoted. I guess you would call it a promotion. I'm not really sure, but he moved to head the park division. Well, on paper, people would think, oh, well, this is the finance guy. Like, he's going to be terrible running the parks. And he did a great job. And that's just really goes to show that some of these executives are really smart, and they know how to adapt into whatever situation that they're in. This guy went from basically being the company accountant to running a very creative division of the company, and did phenomenal in both roles. So it just really depends. It just depends on the person, how adaptable they are. But I think, me and George, we both agree, Matthew, that Peter Rice would be a good CEO. Yeah. Hopefully, maybe he's still pretty young. I mean, you never know. He might be the guy that takes over after Chapek.
Well, and kind of going back to the previous questions, that if Chapek were to bow out, and or the board decides to, release him of his duties as CEO, I think that they may be already having Rice in mind, in my personal opinion. I don't know that for sure. I can't confirm that, but I think that they could have a pretty good idea of who would replace Chapek if that was the case.
I'm sure there's contingency plans, and I'm sure Rice is on that list. Absolutely. And I've heard rumors pointing in that direction. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, George.